Going to do a reading from Seed to Civilization, Story of Man's Food by Charles B. Heiser Jr. This was published in 1973. Doing a reading from the chapter on starchy staples, and this is on the sweet potato. At the time of the discovery of the New World, the sweet potato, Ipomoea batatas, was widely cultivated in tropical America and was also being grown on some Pacific islands. In fact, the sweet potato had become the principal food of the Maoris in New Zealand. The presence of the plant on either side of the Pacific at such an early date poses several interesting questions. Among them, how and when did it get across the ocean? The sweet potato is propagated vegetatively from stem cuttings or root sprouts. The plant, under proper conditions, may flower and set seeds, although, as with the white potato, seeds today are only used in breeding. It has been pointed out, however, that seeds, either carried by birds or on floating logs, may have reached Pacific islands and given rise to plants that man later discovered and cultivated. The suggestion has also been made that the sweet potato might have been independently domesticated, both in the Americas and in the Pacific area, from similar wild species. While the introduction of seeds by some natural means or an independent domestication remains a possibility, it seems far more likely that man was responsible for the introduction of the sweet potato from the Americas to the Pacific region. There are two ways in which this might have occurred. Ancient Polynesian voyagers, who are known to have been efficient seamen, could have traveled to South America, picked up sweet potatoes, then returned home with them and cultivated them. Or, and perhaps more likely, Peruvians, who also are known to have seaworthy vessels, may have carried the sweet potato to one of the Polynesian islands, not necessarily intentionally, but perhaps when driven off their normal course by winds. The prevailing currents are in the right direction for such a trip, and there is no need to account for a return voyage as with the Polynesians. There may be some question about whether the sweet potatoes would not have been eaten on the journey, and if not, whether they still would have been viable after such a long voyage, for sweet potatoes are rather perishable. The presence of the sweet potato in both the Pacific region and South America does not necessarily mean the voyages across the Pacific were frequent in prehistoric times. If they had been, we would expect other plants to have been exchanged among the peoples of the two areas. Many such claims have been made for the spread of other plants, but except for two of them, the evidence is unconvincing. The only other plants that did become established on both sides of the Pacific in prehistoric times are the coconut and the bottle gourd, both of which have fruits that float and hence are well adapted to dispersal by ocean currents. The Voyage of the Kon-Tiki by Thor Heyerdahl was an attempt to prove that primitive man could have crossed the Pacific successfully, and Heyerdahl and others have claimed that there were significant contacts in prehistoric times with an exchange of cultivated plants. There may have been such voyages, but so far as plants are concerned, the only support for the idea of exchange appears to be provided by the sweet potato, and of course, a single accidental voyage could have accounted for it. Although the origin of the sweet potato has recently been given considerable attention, much of its early history in the Americas remains obscure. The sweet potato, like bread wheat, is a hexaploid, and a Japanese botanist, Ichizo Nishiyama, a few years ago reported finding a wild hexaploid species, Ipomea trifida, in Mexico that he believes is the ancestor of the domesticated plant. More recently, he has identified the diploid and tetraploid species apparently involved in its origin. If he is correct, the sweet potato had its origin in Mexico. On the other hand, an anthropologist, Patricia J. O'Brien, from linguistic and anthropologic considerations, has recently concluded that the sweet potato originated in northwestern South America. In this connection, it is of interest that the sweet potato is known archaeologically from Peru, but is yet to be found in other areas. The plant was also being grown in the Caribbean area when the Spanish arrived. The exact place or places of origin, as well as its diffusion into other areas, remains to be clarified. The post-Columbian history, as is to be expected, is much better understood. Columbus took the sweet potato to Spain, and it later became a common staple on ships on return voyages to that country. The Spanish also introduced it from Mexico to Guam so that it might be available as ship supplies on voyages to the far Pacific. As the plant is adapted to warm climates, it was not added to the cultivated plants in most of Europe. Sweet potatoes grown in Spain were imported into England where, for reasons not entirely clear, they were regarded as an aphrodisiac. Man has always wanted to attach aphrodisiacal properties to plants, and it is only natural that such properties would become associated with exotic plants instead of those already well known. The plant had various names in the Americas: a pichu among the Quechua of Peru, camote in Mexico, and aje for starchy types, and batata for sweet types in the Caribbean area. And there is a footnote. The name Kumar, or variants of it, was used in both Peru and Polynesia for the sweet potato. Until recently, it was claimed that this was further evidence that the sweet potato was introduced by man from Peru to the Pacific area, for it would be most unlikely for the same name to have been independently chosen in the two areas. The Peruvian origin of the name has been questioned in recent years, and it has been postulated that Kumar was actually of Polynesian origin and was introduced into Peru in the early post-Columbian period. Of these, the last became the most generally accepted and was transferred to the white potato, as was related above in the reading on the white potato, which means that we now have to refer to the plant under discussion as the sweet potato. This name, of course, is not inappropriate, since 3 to 6% of the carbohydrate is in the form of sugar, and this may increase in storage and with cooking. The plant provides 50% more calories than the white potato, but generally has less protein, 1.5 to 2%. It is a good source of vitamin A and minerals. In contrast to the sweet potato, the part eaten is a true root. Although the plant is still widely grown in the Americas and has become an important crop in the southern United States, it is now more extensively cultivated in Africa and southeastern Asia. Japan now produces 10 times as much as the United States, and it is the second most important crop in that country, rice, of course, being the first. In addition to its use for human and livestock food, considerable amounts are used for alcohol production in Japan. In both Japan and Taiwan, the crop is regarded as quote-unquote typhoon insurance For when rice and other standing crops are destroyed, the sweet potatoes will still be available for food. The sweet potato is a member of the morning glory family. The flowers, seldom if ever produced under temperate zone conditions, bear a close resemblance to the ornamental forms of the morning glory. Although more common at lower elevations, the plant can be successfully cultivated as high as 9,000 feet in the tropics. The roots can't stand waterlogging, and for this reason, the plants are often grown on ridges or mounds to provide good drainage. The vines rapidly cover the ground, and hence the plants require little cultivation. In spite of the fact that for agricultural production the crop requires good drainage, the roots will sprout readily if placed in a jar of water, and the vines will grow luxuriantly, and not infrequently such plants are grown as ornamentals in the home. In some areas, the leaves as well as the roots have served as food.